Okay, thank you all for coming. We want to direct your attention to the programs for bios because we're just going to skip over that and jump right into the nitty gritty anxious stuff. So if you want to know a little bit more about our panelist members, their bios are on the back of your program here. Okay, so you don't even have to introduce yourself, which is, kind of nice. And we're going to just jump right in with our first question. What was your experience like being diagnosed with anxiety?
Let's go down the line.
In any order you like, which isn't helpful for anxious people.
Melissa, yeah, A.
Okay.
Herself, but.
Okay. So I don't actually remember being diagnosed with anxiety specifically, but as a child, I was about 12 years old, and everyone in my family, all my siblings got strep throat, including me. And I kept getting it. And so now looking back, there's some research about childhood rapid onset of OCD and strep throat. And I think that's what happened to me, but I'm not entirely sure. But I had these bouts of feeling really concerned that I had done something wrong and feeling super guilty about things that were like really inappropriate. Like, so stepping on a bug or cutting in line at the bus stop or saying the word suck or like just some things that were really minor. And so every time my parents came to check on me, I had a list of about 5 things to confess. So they got really concerned and I was terrified. And so, yeah, that's when I first knew I had something going on with anxiety. And it was kind of a long journey for me. Medication was really important for quite a while to manage some of that. And while I don't necessarily identify with struggling with OCD anymore, a little bit, it's more kind of generalized. So that's kind of how things kicked off for me. It was hard.
I grew up in Idaho in the 80s. So that tells you something. Kind of a double whammy as far as, knowledge about mental health. So yeah, I thought it was fine until I got older and like all my siblings got diagnosed with things, and I was like, oh yeah, we didn't think that we had any problems. So it's kind of I don't think I necessarily went to a therapist and said, hey, I think I have a problem, and they do all these tests and I was diagnosed. Rather, I just kind of, over the last 20 years, both being in psychology, ironically, and I'm not a therapist either, but that's where I started to learn about my own things. And then having family members get diagnosed and people like say, maybe you have this or whatever, like my wife, and then my kids getting things. And so kind of self-diagnosed, other diagnosed, then have gone to therapy, not continuously for 20 years, but continuously for about 8 years, and then kind of off and on before that, confirmed by therapists, like, yeah, you have these things. So it's kind of, for me, I didn't know if I fit here because I'm probably more depressed than anxious, and the box said depressed or anxious that I clicked on the survey. But it's all good. So probably, like it says on here, social depression, social anxiety, some OCD, and perfectionism, which is probably a part of all those. Definitely is anxious about a lot of perfectionism stuff.
Hey, mine's a little different. About 2 years ago, sorry, today's a hard day. I had a number of traumatic experiences and have had a series of PTSD triggered mental crises, whatever you want to call them, that have coupled with that. And so I went 42 years thinking I had everything under control. And then through a number of things, my world's kind of turned upside down. And so, sorry, I practiced this. I was trying to be good, but so that's my experience. So people who've had assault or trauma, things like that, that's kind of more what I've had. So had to learn to deal with these big debilitating experiences later in life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to piggyback on what you guys said about how you're trying to, relate to the experiences of students and people who may feel anxious. But just what do you recommend for students who feel like maybe they might have anxiety or depression and they just aren't sure what to do?
If you want. So I think, so my experience is different because like all of a sudden this train wreck happened, right? and it was so hard to find help and so hard to give myself permission to find help. So, and now that I've been in this and dealing with therapy and working on, I realized I had anxiety. I had all these issues before, but I just didn't give myself permission to recognize them or have enough self-love to recognize them. And it took this massive experience to really change that. So develop like self-love now, develop self-care now, and look for the helpers. Like Mr. Rogers is right. Look for the helpers and do it now, because it's so much harder when you're in those troughs, right? And that's why I tell my students in the semester, come talk to me now. I can help you now, because when it's hard, it's exponentially more difficult to ask for help and find help.
Yeah, and I'm not a therapist. There's one down there, and there's probably a couple more throughout here. But Googling it, it seems like a fourth of adults have anxiety/depression. And so when they sent out the survey to see what kind of categories we have that we might want to share experiences about, 60 people in the college filled that out, and 15 of them put like anxious/depressed, which is also a fourth. So let's say a fourth of the college. I don't know how many professors there are in the college. So 230, so 50-ish have anxiety/depression. So we're not super special, the three of us. So it's like, it's a common thing. And we had a recent speaker here, Terry Moffat, who gave the Hinckley lecture. She had shocking statistics that I think it was something like 85% of adults in their study, I can't remember what it was, but the majority, let's say, some point in their lifespan have some kind of diagnosable mental illness. So it's not like, oh, do you have it or do you not? But there's some fluidity, like what his experience, where you might not, and then you do, and then maybe you do, and then you don't. Maybe you switch things that you have. So the first thing is, it's like, it's common enough that it's okay. You have friends in the mental illness business. And so that's kind of what, just statistically, you know. And also, just from what I hear, COVID wasn't very helpful. So if you have it now, but you didn't before, you can blame COVID because the numbers are going up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, you're in good company. And it's worth seeking some kind of help. And there's just such a variety of different ways you can approach it. There are medications, therapy. I want to just echo, I also am in therapy. I am a therapist, and I believe it's important to do that whether you are or not. And I've had different experiences where there were more and less helpful therapists and ones that fit better with me. So I always tell people when they want to approach the therapy road to give it 4 tries, which probably seems like a lot, and it is a lot to go and tell all your stuff, but keep giving it chances, because the likelihood of being able to find someone eventually is pretty good. And so there's more than one way to go about it. And therapy is a nice offshoot to learn several other methods that might be helpful for you to either restructure your life, or more simple things like add a meditation, maybe get a little more sleep, or like I said, more serious overhauls of we need to get more support in your life, or we need to manage your relationships. So it's seek help. There's no reason to suffer, and you're in good company.
So the other thing is, and again, not being an expert in clinical, my perspective on mental illness, disorders, whatever, is that it's different than biological illnesses, which I totally could be wrong on that too. But like, you go get a test and they're like, oh, you have this virus or something. Mental health to me is more like a messy continuum. And so a group of people came up with this thing called the DSM-5, and it's got all these criteria on there. You sit down with a therapist, they check the boxes, and they say, oh, you have this thing. And that just means you pass some somewhat arbitrary threshold that made it so they said you had the thing. But that's different than, like, to me, maybe I'm completely wrong, then, oh, you have this virus or not. So everybody has anxiety at some point to some degree. So our symptoms are not like completely unique or not. There's like this, And so maybe it's like you're not even past that threshold of diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. That doesn't mean, oh, your life is great. Like you don't need any help. And you see what I'm saying? So if you think about it that way, you're like, oh, I have anxiety. Don't freak out like, oh, do I have an anxiety disorder? Maybe or maybe not. But either way, when you go to talk to a therapist and get assessments or whatever, you at least have a language to talk about what you're struggling with. And then you can Google it, you can read books about it, you can get support groups about it. You at least have like something to like, what you're talking about. And usually you'll see things and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's totally what I experienced. And you can kind of put your finger on it.
Yeah, I love that. Everyone has a little bit of anxiety, and some days it's more than others. And speaking on that, I wanted to jump to Professor Sanders here and pose this next question at you first. I don't want to push too hard, but you did say today is a hard day, and some days are harder than others. So what does it look like for you when it's a particularly hard day with your mental illness to be able to just keep pushing through and keep going?
Yeah. And it started off as a good day. So I try to recognize where I'm feeling and what I can and can't do. I'll talk to my support network, so my partner, my family, let them know, hey, this is a hard day, I might need this today. I'll go through my self-care, and I did that today. My self-care is typically meditation, a gratitude journal, and exercise. So I was doing all that, and I was doing great this morning, and then life hit, right? And it can just hit out of nowhere, and just kind of rocked me today. And so, because one of the things that I've learned with mine is I have like panic attacks and triggering events out of nowhere. And so I try to really focus on the now, like what I can control in that moment. And sometimes all I can focus on is my breathing. Like I can get to the next breath. And like, that's why I came, because I want to be here with you all. The issues I have can be there till 3 o'clock. I can't do anything about them. But that's like with my students and all of you, what can you do in that moment? And maybe that moment is a breath. Maybe that moment is a class period. Maybe that moment is a day. But that's where like meditation has really, really helped me a lot. And exercise to be like, I'm right here, I'm right now. What does it look like? How can I get through just this moment? Because if I step back and think about, I have 3 kids and they all need to go to college and they all need to go to the temple, and like, it's too much, right? But again, I can be here with you all right now, and I can do my best to share my experiences with you. And right now, that's as good as it's going to get for me. And I'm okay with that. And I'm also okay that I cry. And so that's hard days are crying days, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely okay. Those days happens to everyone. It happens to professors, students, and everything. Do you have anything else to add, professors?
It's kind of describing a
Just
challenging
how does,
times.
what do you do to get through the hard days?
If you can read the really small font.
It's also online.
I listed all of my things, which is probably almost everything you could do, but that's part of my perfectionism. I'm not doing it all perfectly, but I am doing all the things that you should do. But yeah, I mean, what are some of the big challenges I face that have to do with my job, let's say, is things like comparison with people, a persistent feeling of incompetence, fear of failure, obsessing about failure, never really like meeting expectations, or I meet expectations and then there's the next expectation. Imposter syndrome, if anybody's heard of that. Like, what's a guy from Idaho doing being a professor and publishing stuff? If people knew that I didn't really know what I was doing, what would so all those kind of things. And this is what I do to get through it, which includes, if you looked really closely, Diet Dr. Pepper and playing drums.
So in terms of getting through the hard days, part of managing anxiety for me is doing things and like being able to check things off. So sometimes that's really functional for me. So when it's a hard day, I start with the simplest things that I have to do, and it gives me like a little bit of a boost. I can start checking things off, and that'll help me a little bit. On really, really rough days, very similar to what Dr. Hardy talked about Dr. Sanders, really, really slowing things down. I remember a particular bad day almost 10 years ago now. I don't even remember what it was that happened, but I went to the gym and I was trying to, boost myself up and get my workout going. And I started crying in the middle of the gym and I just couldn't even do that. And I was so frustrated. And so I remembered thinking like, I just can't handle anything more than what I'm doing right now. And so I wouldn't even let my mind go like 5 minutes into the future. And so I just narrated what I was doing. It's like, right now I'm walking to my car and that's the only thing I'm doing. And my mind would start to try to go what I was going to have to do later in the day. And I would say, no, I'm walking to my car. And I just kind of carried myself very carefully through the rest of the day, almost like putting a cast on a broken bone. Like we need to just kind of insulate things, don't let them move around too much and stay with what's right now. And then later in life, I've always been a cognitive fan of mindfulness, but in experience, like you read the research, you hear that it's great. And then I would always try it and it made me miserable. And I was like, I don't know why people sit with their anxiety. It's so horrible. Until I found a nice little research-based app. If anybody is interested, I recommend it to people all the time. It's called Unwinding Anxiety. And it's more like a little class, which was more fitting for me. A little 30-day class that taught me about what I would experience and why, and what was actually happening in my mind when I would do super short mindfulness moments, which works well for me. Like we're just going to do a scan from the top of my head to my chin. And I worked with that for about a year and it helped me reclaim some sleep, which is my big thing. That's my big thing. If I'm not having sleep, then I'm not doing it. So yeah, slow myself down. So narrate your way through the hard days, start with the easy stuff and try out mindfulness and try it in a different way if it hasn't worked for you.
Yeah, you all spoke a lot about, compassion and holding yourself to a certain degree. So as we talked about, everyone has a little bit of anxiety, and on those good days, anxiety can kind of be a superpower. So we wanted to ask if any of you had experiences where, because of your anxious thinking or because of anxious tendencies, you're able to work through a situation in a different way and have that new perspective.
Yeah, I think there's two things. First of all, like I've gained this whole new toolkit that I've had to acquire. And so I'm more comfortable talking about my emotions now and like crying in front of a bunch of people, and that's okay now. And then the other thing, because it's interesting, like I said, this kind of happened 2 years ago, right? So I went 42 years managing anxiety. And before that, as a professor, students would come to me and tell me about their struggles, and I would have compassion, right? I would want to help them out. Now I have empathy. Now I feel that, like I feel that deep anguish. And like that to me is when we talk about mourning with those who mourn. And we need that on campus. We need people to really be with each other and have that deep empathy. We've all struggled. We've all have anxiety. We've all had depression at time or another, and we need to like reach out, and more than ever. And that's been one of the most powerful things for me is like this last semester when I was teaching, students would come and I struggle with anxiety or depression. Like I just felt it, right? I loved them and I wanted good for them more than I ever had before. So it's a hard way to get it, but I'm so grateful that I have that insight now.
Let me read my notes. So in addition to what he said, which part of that is, so actually doing this thing was really anxiety provoking for me. So I've been here 15 years and I haven't talked to anybody really about it. I think at BYU, there's maybe 1 or 2 people that I've ever talked to about for 15 years. So yeah. And so even like sending emails to students and stuff was like very anxiety provoking because I want to like maintain this image that I got my stuff together. So now the crafts hit the fan. And so now it's like, okay, now I can connect more with people and have empathy and stuff. But also just humility. Like, I think it's helped me be humble knowing that I have like, so like the scripture says, weakness, we're given weaknesses to make us humble and they can become strengths. And then any weakness can be a strength, any strength can be a weakness. And so I have strengths that if I play them right, they work well. So I'm very efficient, task oriented, efficient, like getting things done, which is great. But then I focus on tasks too much compared to relationships. So I'm kind of like high functioning autistic in that sense. But I can get dinner cooked really quickly and I can get projects done and stuff like that. So being perfectionist, anxious, gets things done. There you go.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that sometimes anxiety can be really useful for me in helping me to keep organized. I don't tend to lose track of things too often, but there's a flip side of that. When you're keeping track of things at 3 a.m., you need to not be keeping track of anything at that point. And so it's like they said, there's like a continuum. At some point it can become overboard and miserable, but it has helped me be pretty productive. I think the other side of it is anxiety can make you a little bit persistent. I feel like one of the upsides of it for me is that even though I'm getting a little better at accepting failures, but I feel like it gives me this drive, like I won't give up. I'm just going to keep trying. And I think part of that is being a little anxious.
Yeah, I love those sweet spots that you find where it's just like, this is the right amount of anxiety to be having. And we all talked about a little bit of what's in our toolkit to help us get through anxiety. And I just wanted to dive into that a little bit more. If we could start with Dr. Hardy about just what you wrote about. You categorized it very specifically. And you wrote what helps you in each category. But if you just wanted to jump off our conversation there.
I'm whatever, if this is an age thing or something, but can't read that. But yeah, so there's therapy, formal therapy, and like there's psychoeducation or whatever you like, reading about it, which is like can be similar to therapy, but it's not formal or whatever. There's meditation, which all of us has mentioned, and that's kind of a big thing these days. There's medication, which I do that as well. And it's weird because I'm totally an anti-medication person, but you do what you got to do. And then let's see, there's wellness things like exercise, sleep. We just had a talk about sleep in class. I probably don't do well at that one, but exercise, eating well, self-care, which is like hobbies and stuff, like ways of venting or whatever. I can't remember if I missed something on here, but I'll give a plug out for my friend Jared Warren in the department, Professor Jared Warren. So he's getting really into positive psych. So he's developing all these web resources. So he has this thing called Best Self 101. And so I've been going through his workshops, their online workshops. He has one about self-compassion. So when I took it first, went through it, as a student or whatever, he has a self-compassion inventory, and then it gives you your percentile. So I teach stats too, so you guys know what percentile is. So I scored the 5th percentile on self-compassion. So that means out of 100 people, only 4 people were less self-compassionate than me. And I was like, wow, that's weird. So I had all my family and my wife's family take it. That was kind of weird, maybe TMI or whatever, too much information. But I was the lowest, and I was kind of like almost weirdly happy to be the lowest because it justified that my inner demons or whatever. So, and then I tried to be really optimistic and took it again, and I was 16th percentile. So that's the best I could do, like really ramping it up. Well, I did this workshop, and then I went back and took it, and I think I was 40th or 50th. So there's really cool stuff out there for self-compassion. It's kind of related to the mindfulness, but it's mindfulness targeted specifically at like having a better opinion, like view of yourself, self-compassion. And it's not like self-esteem, it's different. There's a TED talk about that. But yeah, that was really a useful resource to me that I saw statistical difference.
Yeah, thank you. It shows the ups and downs too.
Talking about our toolkits? Yes. Okay. Yeah, I really like you talked about self-compassion. This is an area I think is probably hard for a lot of us. And I remember Bessel van der Kolk saying, he's an expert in trauma, that mindfulness can be really useful, but if you are unable to have some self-compassion in the process, that it won't do you any good. So you can sit and notice, but if you're being really hard on yourself in that process, it's going to dampen what it can do for you. So I think that's a huge piece. I think it's also important to experiment a little bit with yourself. It's taken me a long time to refine what is actually useful for me. As we all know, there's like a big toolkit for us. Like there's a big, list of things we can pull from, and they're going to have different weights for each of us. So I mentioned sleep is really big for me. So that's probably the biggest thing, like immediate functioning day to day. Exercise is really important for me, but it's taken me a long time to figure out kind of how much I need and sort of what type. So I've had to play with that over the years. And I also think I mentioned this, that medication was a big part of my toolkit for a number of years. And I'm pregnant with my third child. And after my second child, I had some postpartum depression. It was pretty severe. And it was difficult for me. There's still like stigma, even though I'm a believer in medication, it was still really hard for me, but I'm trying to push past that and ready to use it again if I need it, because there's so many things that affect our bodies and our experience. And I want to be really, really careful with offering any advice or opinions about medication because I'm not a physician. But what I will say is that a lot of people have the experience of getting on some kind of psychoactive medication, and the side effects can be rough. And so just be in constant communication with your provider and recognize that some of those things can fade with time, but it's also important to kind of commit yourself to a path of medication, kind of like you commit yourself in finding a therapist. You may have to go through a few. But we know from the research that if you're willing to commit, especially to an antidepressant type of medication for 9 months to a year, you have a better shot of that helping you than getting on and off something for short spans of weeks. So just keep that in mind. And then I will also say that, so I don't want to downplay some of the serious things in our lives that might contribute to anxiety that need to be addressed. But once you kind of have a baseline of a safe place to live and be, and you have your basic needs covered and you have some safe relationships, above and beyond that, I have also had a lot of fun playing with what gives me a dopamine hit, just like a little boost. And so for me, these things are sunshine if it's cool. Sunshine above 70 degrees doesn't do me very much good unless I'm on the beach. Like sunshine with a little breeze, like March weather is awesome. It gives me I can feel it. It's like a dopamine hit. A good workout will do that. My favorite music, I'm into rap from Southeastern United States. I love Southern rap. It gives me a great dopamine hit. Sunshine, sleep, music, and a workout that can really turn things around for me. So playing with yourself, trying to figure out what can give you a little lift can be really handy.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Just minor to add to that is reminding myself to celebrate things, right? Too often we're all overachievers. We're all anxious about that when we get a paper done and we get an A on it because we expected to, and we don't take time to celebrate that. And so kind of with the dopamine thing, looking for joy and taking time to celebrate, it's huge. And if you don't practice it now, maybe I shouldn't say this in front of the dean, but getting tenure was one of the biggest letdowns I ever had, because I worked so hard for that, but it was like, well, I expected to get that. And it wasn't this joy I thought it was. And so I'm really conscious now, trying to celebrate little things that I've done, little ways that I can be with my family. And when I complete a task or teach a lecture, that I celebrate that in some way. And students need to do that now too in your lives. Look for little ways that you can celebrate. I did that. I'm going to go get fudge or whatever you want to do. But I think that's important too. Yeah,
I love that. Those are all great options, and they have a lot of different things that, everyone can figure out what works for them. We've talked a lot about how we talk to ourselves, how we help ourselves, but how do we communicate our anxiety to those around us? What do you do to let people around you know, when things are a little bit tender, or maybe when you need a little bit of more help or empathy?
I think I'm fortunate to have a very supportive support network and a partner who's educated in these kind of things. So that helps. That number one, do that. But I think also is to recognize the power of and. Brene Brown talks about that, and I'm a huge fanboy of hers. But that I can have a bad day and I can still have happy moments in it, and I can be a good dad and I can be depressed, and I can be a good professor and a terrible lecturer, right? And be okay with that. and to be able to communicate that. Because one of the fears I think I had was, okay, I'm having a bad day. I'm really down. But then I watched this YouTube video and I laughed. Oh no, like, can I ask for help anymore? Because I was happy, right? And so I think I've been trying to embrace that more. Like, I can be strong and cry. I can be sad and happy. I can do all these things because of the power of and in my life.
Thank you. That's awesome. There's nuance in it.
I feel like part of my problems, issues, whatever difficulties hinder my ability to do what you just said. So social anxiety, like lack of emotional intelligence, whatever. Might be alexithymia if anybody knows that word, but so difficulty with emotions. So I have trouble talking to anybody. That's why it took 15 years. But I do have like friends, like a support network of people, people that I talk to about it that have similar issues, and then family, that's even difficult. So the answer is that I usually don't.
That's totally okay.
Talk to people about it. So that's not good either. But anyway, working on it.
Sometimes that's adaptive for me. Like when I'm pretty introverted anyway, but when I'm anxious, I tend to sometimes cope with that by just being a little bit more inward. I'm not as extroverted, and I think I have to just give myself permission to do that. But otherwise, I'm fairly public about suffering with anxiety. And most of my friends and a lot of my coworkers know this about me. That's why I felt like it was important to be here, even though it makes me anxious. Because it's just part of it for me is acknowledging it, that I feel like it is just part of human experience for a lot of us. And so if I say it, even when I'm not feeling it, then when I am feeling it, then I feel like that gives others understanding. And having a supportive partner and network is also really important. And it's taken some time, and I'm still working on this, getting used to asking for what I need and also asking for what I don't need. There are relationships in my life where, like, my mom, for example, is like, we come by it honestly. She's anxious also, and so we can build that in each other sometimes. And so sometimes it's asking for what you don't need. I don't need advice. I just, can you listen? And so learning to, and it is a process to figure out even what's going on. A lot of times when I'm anxious, I experience that as irritability. So it's taken some time to kind of recognize, like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. And so I can ask for space, or it's just a matter of practicing and kind of looking inward and taking a second to ask yourself, what's going on with me and what do I need? Giving yourself permission to state that or seek that.
Yeah, thank you. I want to dive in a little bit more with Dr. Hardy here about just how hard it is sometimes to ask for help and give yourself permission to do that. But you did mention that you have this support system of people with like minds and everything. What does that support look like? How does that support come about?
Well, probably depends on the particular issue, but any issue probably has support groups you can find, like online or local or whatever. So basically it's just friends that you can call to talk about, that to talk to about your difficulties that have the same issues, whatever your issue is.
How did you come into that? Did you look it up and seek out the support group, or was it mentioned to you?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably look it up on the internet, or your therapist probably has ideas. Some of them probably are therapist-led groups. Like I've done therapy. I've done group therapy, actually. So that's kind of a mix between like a support group and therapy. So any combination of those, but I just start to build up numbers in my phone.
This is my anxious contact
That's what got
list.
me actually to get a smartphone. I put off getting a smartphone a really long time. But when I started to have these numbers of people to call, I'm like, oh, I need to like have a smartphone.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love hearing about just, how we can talk to others about the things that are happening in our heads. I'm Professor, oh my goodness, I'm mixing all your names up. Professor Sanders and Professor Bamford-Whitting, you both mentioned the support of your family and the support that you felt. What does it look like to be supported from someone who isn't experiencing anxiety to the extent that you are?
There's things that have been helpful for me. especially, and these things I've tried. So my husband is not an anxious person. He's like super reasonable. And but there are some ways in which he has responded to me that in the beginning of our relationship, I didn't know how to read, right? And then later on, I realized how helpful and sometimes even therapeutic it was. And so I was thinking about him and some of the other non-anxious and some anxious support people in my life and the things they do that are really helpful for me. So here are some of them. Not trying to solve things is very helpful, because at the end of the day, most of us suffering with anxiety are pretty functional and we are going to figure it out. We just need to get through these feelings, we get through the sensations. And so a lot of the times what I do not need is solutions. So not trying to solve things is great, but instead listening. When people have just expressed their love and confidence in me, like their belief in me that I was going to figure it out, that's been hugely helpful. Helping when they're asked. So sometimes my husband will say, is there something you'd like me to do? Or would you prefer me to listen? And then that's really helpful because I can say, yes, it would be super nice if you could take this off my plate. So we can be clear about that. And he doesn't just try to do. And then also I have some people in my life that are really good and to remind me that this is not about your competence. This is not about your ability to handle life. This is about you experiencing some sensations and some thoughts and some feelings. And that's what you're focusing on. Tackle that. And that's so really, to sum it up, people that express their belief in me and confidence in me are so helpful.
So I was thinking about this too. And I think the best way to phrase this is I need an advocate, not a hero. I need someone that's going to see what's going on, validate that it's hard, to let me know that they're there for me, let me know how they can help me, and not to compare, because we try to do that to show empathy or concern, but it's usually not the same. And when I'm in those really hard moments, that's even harder sometimes. And as much as we want, because we want to care for the people that are suffering around us, we want to alleviate from them the struggle, and it's a process, right? It's not like medical, right? It's not COVID. Here you go, quarantine for 5 days, and you'll be better. It's a process. Even if I know what the problem is or the origins are, I still have to try to figure out how to live with this thing, right? So I need someone to be there with me all along, and just be my advocate and be my support. And because one of the things that was hardest, and I saw it hurt my wife when I first started going through these things, to having really severe panic attacks, she would ask me, what could I do? And that was the last thing I needed in that moment. Like in that moment, I was just trying to breathe. And for me to try to figure out, well, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. In those moments, that's not what I needed. So just hearing, I'm here for you. You know, like it's not unlikely that you will find me on campus somewhere crying on the floor. And so just sit down with me and cry with me. That's what I need in that moment, right? And not to like, oh, well, this is what you need to do. Or I went through that once in high school and this is how I got through it, right? So just be there and show love and concern and walk the extra mile with me when I'm struggling.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, that empathy, the being there, and just the presence. I feel like that you mentioned both that in helping others and in just helping you. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that empathy and the relationship with students. Especially Professor Sanders said that when students have mental health concerns, you want them to contact you, up front and talk about it first. And then on the hard days, when it's much, much harder anyway, you can be there a little bit more. So let's talk a little bit more about students and the advice that you would give them on how to communicate to you. What types of things do you think you would like to know about where students are at and what constitutes a good day or a bad day, and how you can help them in that with your little anxiety superpower sidekick?
So I'll be brief because I know they look like want to do question and answers, but clear expectations are kind expectations. So if you're in my class, come talk to me first day. Let me know what you have, how we can help you. What's our plan, right? Because it's easier for me to plan that. And it's easier for me, if I'm going through a crisis, it's easier for people to know what I need, as opposed to having to deal with it later. And most people on campus are willing to work with you and have empathy, but it's hard. And I know, because I've had those moments where I've reached out for help and been rejected. But you just please work with your professors, And if you haven't already, do it now, because being clear what you need and what they can do is the kindest way to proceed.
Anything you want to add before we jump to the audience?
Just wholeheartedly agree with that and recognize that sometimes your 20s or when you're in college is a time when a lot of this stuff becomes more tumultuous, and sometimes you don't always know what you need. But I think a lot of us are really willing to work with you on that if you can just approach us and be proactive at the beginning and say, I'm not entirely sure what I might need, or I do know what I need, but this is how it might show up for me. I think a lot of us are really willing to work with students if they just let us know.
Well, the other thing I was thinking of is, as far as getting help, like you can't get very much help if you're isolating and like keeping to yourself. But any disorder has a certain level of stigma or social desirability or acceptance or whatever. And so probably the ones that are more acceptable, it's easier to put yourself out there. So anxiety is probably pretty high on that because it's so prevalent. If you maybe eating disorders, addiction, some of those things, maybe bipolar would be probably on the other end, like more stigmatized, more fear of getting out there. But it's hard to get any help. I mean, you can go to therapy without anyone knowing but the therapist. But if you're gonna have social support, other stuff, you have to kind of get out there. And obviously it's like hard, like for me and stuff. So getting out there and being, but that's where I met people that I have as far as my social support is saying, okay, I'm gonna be willing to like let a certain group of people know about. Now it's more than that, but
Now it's smartphone.
now it's on the internet. You can't post anything on the internet. No.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Along with all of these questions that we've had for you, we also just wanted to see if our live studio audience here had any questions in particular, and we have a lovely mic going around. So we're going to open up the time for you to ask any questions you may have about what a social scientist looks like with anxiety.
Hi, this is kind of fun. I was just going to ask, sometimes something I struggle with is going to different like activities and stuff, where sometimes that's exactly what I need, and other times I need to allow myself the time to just recharge. How are you all able to know the difference between those two situations? If that makes sense.
There's some things that are, I mean, just trial and error. One thing for me, I'm also an introvert. And so size of the activity sometimes is important. Like I know if it's like going to be like a group of like 10 or something, that's a lot easier and less taxing for me. I have triggers that I need to worry about, so I consider those if it's with an activity. But I think what right now, like the best thing is like trial and error and kind of journal. Like keep track, like, wow, that was too much. What was it? Oh, it was nachos. Nachos are my trigger. I can't go to events with nachos, right? But because it's so personal, right? What works for us isn't necessarily going to work for you, but understanding that and having like a kind heart thinking about these things. Well, what is it that really was troubling with me? And that's okay. Like just trying to be real with it. And then think of like, okay, this one was okay. This one was bad. What's the difference? And just trying to build up a framework for it. And it's hard for everybody in college. Like it's just everyone, whether they admit it or not, it's the real thing, right?
You can kind of bookend difficult experiences. So if there's something you are going to do that you have to do or you want to do, but you know it's going to be difficult, then you can kind of bookend. So maybe you call somebody or you do something before, meditate before, and then like you have something that you have set to do after. And that kind of makes it easier to succeed or whatever.
This question is for Professor Sanders in particular, but I'd be happy to hear other thoughts as well. But I was just wondering how you manage like explaining triggers to someone when like you get triggered and like don't really know how to explain that to them of like what's going on for you.
Yeah, that's something like one of the things I've learned the most is you hear I heard about like before I heard about triggering and, was it real or how severe was it? And honestly, some of the triggering events I've had after were worse than the actual trauma. And I also want to recognize I have a place of privilege as like a highly educated white male. I can kind of say these things and people don't think, oh, you're weak for that. And I might actually get praise for coming out and saying I have these struggles. So I want to recognize that positionality, but I've just tried to be, this is because it's rocked my world so much. It's become like something I'm really passionate about. Like I hope people don't have to go through some of the things I have. And so if I can be that advocate, that helps me own my trauma in a new way too. And makes me feel better that I'm trying to make the world and other people's lives better too. So I try to reinterpret it and empower it.
I think there's two kinds of support people. There's the people who know what you're talking about and those who don't. And the people who you don't, it's probably impossible to really convey your experience. But that's why I have a list of numbers in my phone that are people who do. And then I don't really have to worry about how to explain because they totally get what I'm talking about.
And it's okay if not everybody understands, which is also hard, but sometimes people just won't be able to hold that for you. And it's so hard sometimes not to internalize that, but it's important to remember that not everybody is going to get it. And that's hard.
Through it.
You can throw it. It's safe to throw.
Okay, that makes me a little anxious, but it's okay. Are you ready?
It's like a game.
There's your dopamine hit.
Thank you. So I know in academia, there's a lot of like conferences and networking and things that you have to do with other people, sometimes strangers. How do you navigate that, especially in cases where you're feeling social anxiety? I'll throw it back real quick.
For some odd reason, I'm really good at networking and I have no idea why. Because I shouldn't. I also shouldn't be in this profession because social anxiety professor doesn't seem like it works very well. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I just I get in the zone, get my groove on.
I try to be really strategic. I think about why I'm at this conference, who I want to talk with, when's the best time. Like, again, like you're saying, maybe there's something that's going to be exhausting. But that's how I really have to be strategic about my networking and how I'm doing it and where I'm going to put most of my energy and effort with it.
I think for me, if I have something that I'm going to talk about, or if I've been put in a position or asked to speak, it's easier for me than jumping in. And so I think kind of just preparing yourself with what are my questions and what's most useful for me to do, and trying not to go in blind and just expect it to happen is really helpful for me. Just trying to be planful about it. And if I have a topic, that reduces my social anxiety, because I don't feel super comfortable shooting the breeze with people. But if we have somewhere we're going, then it's easier.
I know I've said things that were very socially awkward at conferences, being overbearing or saying something that I probably shouldn't have said. But yeah, and I probably since I said I'm very efficient, task oriented, I instrumentalize people at conferences. So
because mine's different because it's trauma, right? Like the big severe thing is trauma, and like recognizing, I guess I had a process that I recognized I didn't do anything wrong or it wasn't my fault, and the subsequent things aren't my fault either. So that was the biggest thing. Other than that, it's been, just recognizing that this is part of the life. This is part of the struggle we go through and how we grow. So for me, there hasn't been like a deontological like worthiness component to it. Once I got past that, there wasn't an error I did that caused this.
Yeah. And I think for me, at some point, I did have to kind of step back and say, my feelings are all over the place. If I were to chart them for a day, like they're just so varied. And so I kind of stopped leaning into the idea that the Holy Ghost would prompt me with feelings. And And I had some other data gathering experiences where I realized for me, it was more about a flight of ideas or a feeling of creativity. And for me to have a feeling of peace, like honestly, on some level, I'm not entirely sure what that is. And so I kind of let that go. And instead, seeking for experiences of feeling loved are really important. Sorry. Just the other day, I was sitting with my kids and I was giving them a nursery lesson at home because we had COVID. And I just, we're just going through the very basics of the nursery lesson about the creation. And I told my kids that, Jesus created the world for them because he loved them. And my daughter turned to me and she's like, I think Jesus loves you too. And it had just been a while since I'd felt the Spirit with my kids on something so simple and foundational. And I realized, well, like that is something I know I can feel. And it's different for me from like peace or the absence of anxiety, but it's really confirming. So it's just kind of experimenting with how does the Lord talk to me and how can I recognize that clearly, and letting go of anyone else's definition of what that's going to look like.
Because of the nature of my challenges with like low self-compassion, difficulty with emotions, I've had a huge challenge trying to feel of God's love, feel of God's presence. But I learned that Mother Teresa had the same problem. So that was kind of interesting to learn. She felt abandoned by God most of the time. So yeah, that makes it difficult because the nature of what I'm struggling with hinders my ability to feel of the Spirit. So.
Natalie has a positive note to end us on, and then we'll wrap it up.
Perfect. Yeah. So one final question, just moving forward. It's related and unrelated, however you want it to be, but it's just what gives you hope?
I think we're having things like this, that we're starting to normalize it, that we're talking about self-care, self-compassion, and that's not some indulgent thing that gives me hope.
Well, again, because of my issues, I struggle with hope too, depression. So struggle with, so probably, well, I don't know if this gives me hope, but it helps me. Yeah, probably. So kind of what he was saying about being in the present. If I look in the past, it's shame. If I look in the future, it's fear. And so as long as I stay here, then there's hope. But when I start to get out of the here, then that's when there's problems.
I would agree with that. And I think it's really helpful for me to recognize that things are always changing, that I might be anxious right now, but in an hour, there's a good chance I won't be. But then anxiety will probably come back, but it's been going up and down in my life for a long time and I'm still here. And so just holding on to the fact that anxiety never stays forever. It's not always with me. It goes kind of up and down is hopeful. And I've kind of learned to be a little bit excited and curious about it sometimes even. And it just helps me feel like this is something I can relate to. I can be with this and it can be part of my life and that's okay.
Thank you all so much. We'll just wrap up here. We have a closing prayer.
We just really want to thank our great moderator, Natalie Herbst-Sturchy. She did an amazing job. And a special thank you to our panel. This was always a trap, asking anxious people to come do something that's anxiety inducing. So we're really
grateful. A spotlight.
Yeah.
And a spotlight that we tried to turn on a little bit. But also, we know that one of the aims of the BYU education is spiritually strengthening. And I hope that you were able to feel today that you really saw a consecrated offering with the vulnerability they brought and the things that they were willing to share with you. And that really is genuinely a special offering. So I'm really grateful. We do have a closing prayer. I'll just pass the mic down. But then if you want to exit this way, we have a little present for you. It's a very anxious stress ball. I think you'll understand that when you see it. The hair standing straight up on end. And then we have some kolaches out in the hallway for you. Please come back in the fall for more Picture a Social Scientist with us. Right behind you.
I was like, okay.